Hi everyone, and thanks for joining us for another interview during our Wellbeing Week in the summer camp. We're joined by a very special guest today, someone who has worked very closely with RSNO throughout his career, and that's Jay Capperauld. Jay, just before we get into it, I should probably tell people who I am as well. Hi everyone, I'm Andy Stevenson. I am the Director of Learning Engagement at the RSNO. And yeah, this is Jay Capperauld. Jay, can you tell us a wee bit about yourself?
Yeah, hi everyone. My name is Jay Capperauld, as Andy says. I'm a composer, so I've been working primarily as a composer for the last 6 or 7 years now, and been working with the RSNO and BBC Scottish Symphony Orchestra and various other organisations throughout Scotland and the UK. And so it's brilliant fun to work as a composer. I really honestly never thought that I'd be making my way as a composer, to be honest. I actually started off as a saxophonist, but I sort of switched over to the even darker side of composition.
Fantastic. Jay, you're definitely underselling yourself there. Jay's a phenomenally talented composer who, you're actually a member of our Composers Hub in the first iteration of it, weren't you?
Yeah, you're absolutely right. I was involved in the RSNO Composers Hub in the 2015/16 season, and that was actually really my first opportunity to write for full orchestra. So up until that point, I had never had the opportunity to write for the full forces before. So that was really me sort of dipping my toes into writing for the orchestral forces, which was just such a phenomenal experience. And also, getting the opportunity to meet the musicians of the RSNO, and forming those kinds of connections that become long-term working relationships. And so I've kept in touch with various musicians throughout the year and sort of forged wee projects and things, and been really lucky to be working with Catherine Bryan on a couple of projects recently. So I wrote a solo flute piece for her, and I'm now actually writing a flute concerto which Catherine and the RSNO are going to perform in the upcoming season, which I'm so excited about. I really can't wait to share that piece with everyone.
Okay, really open-ended question to start. What is music to you, Jay?
Well, music to me is really my ikigai, if you've ever heard that phrase before. It's a Japanese term, which is basically your reason for getting up in the morning.
Yep.
That's what music means to me. And music is my life. It's at this point it is my life. It just rules absolutely everything. It's how I exist. It's become my kind of life philosophy in a way as well. But I say all that, and at the same time, it's just music. It's just entertainment. So I'm not that precious about it. But
there's so many themes you've touched on there, and I'd love to explore them further, but I love the fact that you talk about your experience in music, and almost it's an extension of yourself, and that you see music, or you see the world through the lens of music, which I think is quite interesting, because for me, I know this is part of the Wellbeing Week. When you say that, it screams Wellbeing to me.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely. It really is. And, I think when we use that word well-being now, there are so many other topics that can become conflated within it. I feel, for me, well-being, it's a way of approaching the world whereby you can find some objectivity in order to be able to view the world in a more realistic and less subjective way.
Maybe for our listeners, it'd be quite exciting to know that you've composed or are composing a flute concerto for Catherine Bryan, our principal flautist, which we're all very excited to hear, and it's coming out next season. And it's called Our Gilded Veins, is that right, Jay?
Yeah, that's right, yep.
Brilliant. Could you maybe tell us a wee bit about the piece and maybe the concept behind the piece, and how that relates to maybe your own identity and your own struggles with sense of self and identity?
Yeah, absolutely. The piece is about kintsugi pottery, which is a Japanese art form, essentially. So what happens in kintsugi, essentially, is that if you have a bowl or a plate or an object around the house that ends up breaking in some sort of way, instead of throwing that object out, what they do through the art of kintsugi is to glue it back together using gilded lacquering. So it's this golden sort of lacquering that joins the object together. So in a way, it's highlighting the breakage of that object. And to me, that was just such a delicious metaphor for mental health and well-being. And because it really highlights the fact that we as humans are or can be essentially broken objects, and that there's nothing to be ashamed of for that. Life happens to people, therefore trauma happens to people, therefore we have our own sort of breakages. And instead of trying to cover up those breakages, I think it's far more important that we highlight those breakages and actually use them in order to I suppose, celebrate our own sort of history. I think it allows people to then reclaim a bit of ownership over what they've gone through in their lives. And I think that that's an incredibly important message. You're not only sort of remaking this object and highlighting and celebrating its breakage, but you're trying to therefore make it stronger as part of that breakage, as part of the gilding that they put on it.
Well, Jay, as a music lover and also as a practicing musician, that was really inspirational and quite eye-opening just to put Wellbeing in that context. Jay, thank you so much for your time. It's been, again, as always it is, we've only spoken a few times, but it's always such a pleasure to see behind that compositional curtain rather than just hearing the music. I guess the last question I would ask you is if you were giving advice to a young person who maybe has that musical itch and doesn't have to be classical music, and they might be sitting in a cover class for home economics or geography, and their teachers fired this on the RSNO website, and they want to be able to explore things in a better way. What advice would you give them if they maybe don't have access to instruments or classical music in general?
Gosh, that's a difficult question, especially when you're talking about access in that way. For me growing up when I was younger, and this would be the sort of advice that I would give myself at that time, is just to keep a curious mind and a curious ear and just keep them open all the time. And you never really know where you'll find yourself. Like, for me, my journey has been that, I thought I was going to be a classical saxophonist, and then it sort of has turned into composition. And it's been a kind of wild ride in that sense. That has all been down to just me trying to keep my ear and mind just completely open and curious, and also expose yourself to as much as you possibly can in terms of culture, in terms of music, including the things that you think you won't like. It's almost like sometimes, like especially with new music, there's a phrase that Harrison Birtwistle uses where he says that sometimes accessing culture can feel like you're trying to get your children to eat their greens, but actually that can be so beneficial, because you never know just how healthy it's going to be for you once you finally take that step. So just experience as much as you can, try the things that you don't like, and that goes for life too. That's not just about culture, it's for life. Just get out there, experience things, and it will 100% benefit you in the long run.
Yeah, and you don't need, what's great about that, you don't need affluence or... Like, obviously we offer free access through most of our education stuff to anyone in Scotland, which is fantastic, and anyone beyond mostly. But I guess the point you're making there as well is when you're saying experience, it doesn't have to be sitting in a concert hall. It can be just paying attention to the film music on in the background. It can be paying attention to any pop tune that's on. It can be paying attention to anything, absolutely anything at all.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's about individual curiosity as well. So it's about not caring what anybody else is telling you, And I suppose, like, for those who are really, individually curious or individually thoughtful in that way, will probably see the irony in me offering that as advice, is not to care about what anybody else thinks. But you really genuinely shouldn't care about what anybody else thinks. Find the things that you're interested in and really just pursue it absolutely doggedly. And you will find that level of satisfaction, is to say that will provide you with the level of satisfaction in your life that will hopefully sustain you and give you that reason to get up in the morning.
Fantastic, Jay. It's inspirational, as always. Thank you very much.
Thanks very much for having me.